If you thought the 49ers had a tough road ahead this season, wait until you hear this. The NFL just handed San Francisco a travel schedule that is unlike anything we've ever seen before. We're talking about more than 38,000 miles in one season. That's not just a lot. That's the most miles any team has ever traveled in NFL history. And when you really start to look at where those miles are coming from, you begin to understand why this is such a massive storyline. You already know about the international spotlight. The Niners are headed to Australia to face the Rams at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, a stadium that seats around 100,000 people. That's nearly 16,000 miles round trip just for that game alone. Add in another international matchup in Mexico City, which is technically a home game, but still nearly 4,000 miles of travel, and suddenly this doesn't feel like a normal season anymore. It feels like a world tour. And that's before you factor in the traditional road trips. Cross-country travel to face the Giants in New Jersey, a long haul down to Atlanta, nearly 3,000 miles to Kansas City, trips to Seattle and Arizona inside the division. Even the shorter local trip to play the Chargers at SoFi Stadium still adds up over time. When you stack it all together, the total surpasses 38,000 miles. That's a grind on the body. That's time in the air. That's recovery windows shrinking. And for a team that has battled injuries over the years, that part should at least make you pause. Now, here's the big question. Is the NFL screwing the 49ers? On the surface, it feels unfair. No other team is logging this kind of mileage. But there's another side to this. The 49ers are one of the premier brands in the league. Global fan base. Historic franchise. When the NFL wants to showcase the game internationally, they're going to pick teams people around the world recognize. That's not a punishment. That's a reflection of relevance. Still, relevance doesn't eliminate fatigue. Geography already puts San Francisco at a built-in disadvantage compared to teams in the Midwest or on the East Coast. Being based in Northern California means longer flights almost every year. This season just magnifies it. So the conversation isn't just about fairness. It's about preparation. Can this coaching staff manage rest? Can the training staff keep players fresh? Can depth players step up if the travel wear and tear starts to show? I want to hear from you. Do you think the NFL is screwing the Niners with this travel schedule? Type yes or nitrogen monoxide in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you stand on this because this is going to be one of the defining themes of the season. And if you want daily breakdowns like this, travel analysis, roster upgrades, schedule reactions, make sure you subscribe. We're pushing toward the 1,000 subscribers on this channel, and you being part of that milestone would mean a lot. Hit that like button too if you think travel is going to be a real factor this year. But here's the thing, raw mileage only tells part of the story. To really understand how crazy this schedule is, we need to go trip by trip and break down exactly where those miles are coming from and which stretch of the season could be the toughest on the roster. That's where this gets even more interesting. Let's break this down mile by mile, because when you actually stack these trips on top of each other, it starts to feel less like a football schedule and more like a travel documentary. Start with the biggest one, Melbourne, Australia. That matchup against the Rams at the Melbourne Cricket Ground is nearly 16,000 miles round trip. 16,000. That's not just a long flight. That's a complete disruption of routine. You're dealing with extreme time zone differences, altered sleep cycles, extended time in the air, and a full week of preparation that has to be adjusted around international logistics. Even if the league gives the team extra time to acclimate, your body still feels it. Jet lag is real. Recovery windows shift. Hydration, nutrition, and soft tissue management become critical. Now add Mexico City. That's close to 4,000 miles round trip. It's technically a home game, but let's be honest, it still requires travel, altitude adjustment, and modified preparation. Mexico City sits over 7,000 feet above sea level. That affects stamina and conditioning, especially for linemen and defensive front players who rotate heavily. The 49ers have experience there. You remember when Jimmy Garoppolo, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Fred Warner put on a show in that environment before. But experience doesn't erase the physical toll. Then you factor in the traditional cross-country trips. New Jersey to face the Giants, over 5,000 miles round trip. Atlanta, more than 4,000 miles. Kansas City, nearly 3,000. Dallas, around that same mark. Even divisional games like Seattle and Arizona still pile up because of the West Coast geography. The shortest trip of the season is to Sophie Stadium against the Chargers, about 600 miles round trip. That's considered short in this context. That tells you everything. When you total it all up, you cross the 38,000-mile mark. No team in NFL history has traveled more in a single season. And here's what makes this fascinating. Not all miles are created equal. A quick 2-hour flight within the same time zone is very different from a 15-hour international haul across hemispheres. The body reacts differently. Sleep cycles are disrupted differently. Practice schedules shift differently. So here's what I'll be watching, and maybe you should too. How does the coaching staff structure the week after the Australia game? Do they build in a mini-bye effect? How aggressive are they with rotations early in those games? Do we see deeper defensive line usage in high-altitude or long-haul matchups? Those little adjustments might quietly determine one or two games in the standings. And let me ask you this, which trip worries you the most? Is it the Melbourne flight, the altitude in Mexico City, or one of those brutal East Coast swings? Drop the city name in the comments. I want to know what you think is the biggest trap on this schedule. If you appreciate this kind of deep dive instead of surface level takes, hit the like button. And if you want consistent updates on how this team manages travel, injuries, and recovery throughout the season, subscribe. We're building toward 2,000 subscribers, and you being part of that push matters more than you think. But travel alone doesn't win or lose games. Depth does. Roster construction does. And the first move the 49ers made this offseason might not be flashy, but it tells you something about how they're preparing for a year like this. Let's talk about that next. While everyone is focused on the miles, the 49ers quietly made their first move of the offseason, and it tells you exactly how they're thinking about a season like this. They brought back Nick Zakel on a one-year deal. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. That's not a headline-grabbing signing. That's not a Pro Bowl edition. But in a season where you're traveling more than any team in league history, depth isn't optional. It's survival. Zakel gives you positional versatility. He can play center. He can play guard. He's not someone you're penciling in as a locked-in starter, but he's the type of player who can stabilize things if injuries hit during a brutal travel stretch. Think about that. Long flights, shorter recovery windows, physical wear adding up week after week. That's when having a reliable swing interior lineman matters. Even if he's primarily a camp body or a practice squad elevation, he gives the coaching staff flexibility. And let's be honest, the interior offensive line still has real questions. Left guard has uncertainty. Center has been average at best. If you're serious about maximizing this offense and protecting your quarterback through a 38,000-mile season, you need sturdier answers there. Zakel isn't the solution, but he's insurance. And sometimes insurance is exactly what keeps a season from unraveling in October. Then you zoom out and look at the broader free agent picture. There are key unrestricted names that could walk. Depth along the defensive line, special teams contributors, and arguably one of the most important decisions is that kicker. It sounds simple, but in a season where travel fatigue could tighten games late, you can't afford instability in the kicking game. Close road games in hostile environments are often decided by 3 points. That's not the place to gamble. You also have decisions at receiver, along the defensive front, and in the secondary. Do you prioritize youth and explosiveness? Do you try to retain familiarity and continuity? With the kind of schedule ahead, speed and rotation might matter more than ever. Fresh legs in the fourth quarter of a cross-country game can be the difference between a 10-win team and a 12-win team. And here's something else to think about. Travel amplifies roster weaknesses. If your depth is thin at one position, a single soft tissue injury after a long-haul flight can snowball quickly. That's why these minor signings matter more this year than they normally would. So let me ask you this. Would you invest premium draft capital in upgrading center or left guard? Or would you prioritize a defensive playmaker instead? Type O-line or defense in the comments. I want to see where you'd allocate resources if you were running the front office. And if you want a full projected depth chart breakdown, salary cap angles included, make sure you subscribe. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and I'd love for you to be part of that milestone. Hit like if you want a complete offensive line film breakdown next. Because here's the bottom line. Travel creates stress. Depth absorbs stress. The better constructed this roster is in the trenches and on special teams, the less likely that 38,000-mile schedule derails the season. Now let's step back and talk big picture. What does all of this actually mean for the Niners season outlook, and how should you, as a fan, be thinking about this year? Now let's zoom out and look at the big picture, because this is where everything comes together. The travel, the roster depth, the international spotlight, it all feeds into one simple question. What does this actually mean for the 49ers season? First, this schedule is going to test discipline more than talent. You already know this roster has high-end players. You've seen them win big games. You've seen them handle playoff pressure. But handling 38,000 miles of travel is different. It's about preparation. It's about sleep. It's about hydration. It's about how seriously players take recovery during the week. The teams that survive long travel seasons are the ones that treat recovery like game planning. Second, watch the early part of the season closely. If the international trip to Australia comes early, how the team responds the following week could tell you a lot. Do they look flat? Or do they look energized from the spotlight? If Mexico City falls mid-season, does the altitude impact show up in the fourth quarter? These aren't excuses, they're variables. And the way the coaching staff manages those variables will quietly shape the win-loss column. You should also pay attention to depth usage, rotations on the defensive line, snap counts for veteran players, how aggressively they lean on younger legs in back-to-back travel weeks. If you start seeing more balanced snap distribution, that's not random, that's strategic preservation. And if you don't see it, and injuries pile up, that's when this mileage stat becomes more than just a headline. Now here's the encouraging part. This franchise is built for big stages. International exposure in Australia and Mexico City isn't a burden, it's a statement. The league doesn't send irrelevant teams overseas. They send brands. They send contenders. That matters. It reinforces that the 49ers are viewed as one of the premier organizations in football. So are they getting screwed? I don't think so. I think they're being showcased. But being showcased comes with responsibility. You have to handle it the right way. You have to manage the grind. And if they do that, this schedule becomes a badge of honor instead of a disadvantage. Here's my final question. For you, do you think this travel schedule costs the 49ers at least one game this season? Type yes or nitrogen monoxide in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you land on that. And if you've made it this far, that tells me you care about the details, so help us hit to 1,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and like the video if you appreciate this deeper breakdown instead of surface level reactions.